With the Parliament officially opening tomorrow, it's game on as Labor's real agenda starts to be exposed in the raft of new bills it's introducing into the Parliament this week. After presenting as a small target, safe change kind of choice, and making the election campaign really about removing an unpopular PM, Anthony Albanese says he's got 18 bills ready to go and no time to waste. Much of what he's got in mind will permanently change the way our economy works and government is run. Entrenching in legislation a 43% emissions cut by 2030 means all but ending coal-fired power generation in this country within 8 years. Given that it currently supplies over 60% plus of our electricity, this is a massive change that will demand extraordinary amounts of new generation and, more problematically, vast amounts of new storage and new transmission. Storage that technology can't yet deliver, and transmission lines that aren't yet built, and if they are, will cost us billions. It'll be a miracle, given all of this, if we avoid major blackouts as the coal sector shuts down. I can't see any government being re-elected if it fails to keep the lights on. And that's before we even factor in the budget reality of killing coal, given it's likely to be our #1 export this year and pays billions into our national bottom line. Then there's a constitutionally entrenched Indigenous voice to the Parliament, designed to divide us based on race, using a model that the government doesn't even want us to know about, let alone debate, before we vote. Plus a new federal ICAC and integrity watchdog. Well, fair enough. But how do you get the balance right between one in New South Wales that throws out a premier over a bottle of wine versus one in Victoria that's just delivered last week adverse findings about a whole lot of sitting Labor MPs, and yet we find there were no further consequences for any of them? The challenge for a chastened opposition under new leader Peta Credlin will be for the coalition to discover the conviction in opposition that it failed to show in its latter years of government, so that come the next election, we really have a clear alternative to Labor rather than just a weak echo with policies to match. But in the end, it's governments that lose elections, not oppositions that win them. And there are a host of challenges right now that Labor can no longer spin their way through. Like the threat of foot and mouth, now rampant across Indonesia, and with something like 5,000 Australians returning from Bali every day, the minister in charge of protecting our country's agricultural sector, well, he hasn't even got the basics in place. 2 weeks ago, Ag Department officials ruled out footbaths at the airport on OH&S grounds. Now, 1 week ago, that minister did a backflip, promising sanitised mats to ensure travellers wipe their shoes before clearing customs. Today, here was Minister Murray Watt, still making excuses.
Almost all the international airports in Australia have now received the mats. They're being tested and trialled, and what I'm told is that either today or tomorrow we'll start seeing them in place for passengers to walk over.
What a joke. And in the media today, all this talk from the Albanese government about the unprecedented powers it's given itself to deal with this foot and mouth risk. Well, all those unprecedented powers are nothing more than spin. All they entail is the right to order people to use the foot mats rather than merely request they use them. The very same foot mats, of course, you heard from the minister, that aren't even in place yet in all of our airports. Right now, Australia's way behind the 8 ball. New Zealand, for example, they're already questioning every single incoming traveller and screening all baggage. And we're yet to do any of this. Just the same randomised checking we've always done and nothing more. Now, if I was an Australian farmer right now tonight, I'd be working up a class action lawsuit against Minister Watt for dereliction of duty if and when this disease arrives here. Then there's Labor's plans first to emasculate, then abolish the Australian Building and Construction Commission, the ABCC. Now, the ABC is the watchdog established to protect building companies and workers from militant union thuggery. And militant thuggery, there's plenty of it. Since 2016, when it was established or re-established, it was of course in the Howard years until the Rudd government abolished it, the CFMEU has been fined more than $14 million. and been prosecuted for more than 1,600 conventions of the law. In this financial year alone, there's been $2 million in penalties awarded against the CFMEU. And right now, as of tonight, the CFMEU or their representatives are before the courts in 36 separate legal matters. CFMEU boss John Setka, well, he's got a record as long as your arm. And while Anthony Albanese made a big show about expelling him from the Labor Party, Setka is still calling the shots through union donations, such as the $125,000 given recently to the South Australian branch of the Labor Party. On the weekend, the new Workplace Minister, Tony Burke, derided the Australian and Building Construction Commission's campaign against the flying of union flags on building sites. Now, but hang on, this is the same Labor Party that says there's great symbolism in flags. You hear it about the Indigenous flags and others. And of course, the flying of the Eureka flag is meant to give everyone the message that the unions run the place. If you live in my state of Victoria, you'll know, of course, that they do. At a time when inflation is spiralling out of control and cost of living is front of mind, why would the government greenlight a union campaign to raise costs and cut efficiency of a sector that's roughly 10% of Australia's overall economy? If Labor goes ahead and guts the ABCC, it's further evidence that this Labor government is no different than its Rudd-Gillard predecessor, and that when big unions pay their Labor campaign donations, after the win comes their real reward.